you can't edit it. It's terrible.
Exactly. And I'm smart enough now to tell my mother to not call me during certain hours. So I called her and I said, don't call me this afternoon. But apparently I didn't call everyone on my list.
And that's the thing, is the notifications aren't actually that annoying if you're not usually on video calls or things. But I guess once you start doing more of these from being here, then it's like, oh, it becomes a problem when everything is dinging at once. So I can relate because same for me. So okay, so we're back. Today we are joined, Tiffany's back, of course, and we have Stephanie Zito. So Tiffany, do you want to do an intro? You're better at this stuff than I am, though.
So this is our friend Stephanie, who we're super excited to have on. One of the things I love is that Stephanie does a lot of like old school travel hacking that we don't really talk about anymore. Like nobody really talks about that stuff, but you've been all over the place. You've done all the things. You've worked on like mercy ships off the coast of Africa and just were being a digital nomad before it was cool. So I think it's fun to talk about, fun stuff.
That is very cool.
It's fun to be here with you guys.
Where do we even start?
All of that, like now I actually have my links open and have things going on. Sorry, operational challenges today.
I'm having operational challenges here too. I was just too excited before this all started, and then let me close these windows here. Sorry. Okay.
It's okay. It's like YouTube is not receiving enough video. I'm like, why are you mad, YouTube? You've got plenty of video. There's 3 of us.
It's because everybody in the entire world has started a YouTube channel this week.
I think everybody's using all the bandwidth, so when you combine the two, it's
I got bored doing my 7 podcasts, so now I'm going to have a YouTube channel too.
So what are you drinking? You were just saying you were...
I am drinking... Well, we decided, I had a few choices, but I decided to go with my Bombay Minis, courtesy of American Airlines, with my aromatic tonic water. And I'm set up right here on my table, so I don't even have to go far unless I need more ice.
Okay, now I have a question about the minis. So did you get along well with the crew and they slipped you a few, or how did this go down? Just for,
no, I always order a double and a Denzani water together, and then I put the double in my pocket because I don't drink it most of the time. So, and it's my traveling mini bar, and I don't always, drink it while I'm on the road. So I wind up with a collection of them.
Well done. I need to start doing that with I love the truly hard seltzer they have now on American Airlines. So, but actually that's more than 3.4 ounces, so that won't end well. Tiffany, are you drinking something?
I am. I have iced coffee, spiked. So iced coffee, dark rum, some coconut milk.
You said dark rum. Oh, there is alcohol.
Yeah, I spiked it.
Sounds delicious. Ben, when you go back to Tampa, St. Pete to see your family, my family has a brewery, and they make hard seltzer in St. Pete.
Really?
He asked Tiffany where you were, if you were on that side of Florida, because I was going to figure out how to get you some hard seltzer for your happy hours.
Can I ask what it's called? Is that...
3 Daughters.
I will check it out. That is, I have become a big hard seltzer fan, only thanks to American Airlines, because I've run out of other things to drink at this point. So I think that's kind of where we're at. So, by the way, you're in Portland, right?
Yep, I'm in Portland.
Your background looks very... I feel like I'm in not a Mexican resort or something, but because it's blurred out, so it looks like a very nice Mexican resort, like a suite, and that's the living room, because there's it's all blurred.
I do like to think of my house as a resort. I am missing like my own personal concierge, and I am doing my own cooking, but yeah, this is my. I do have a hanging chair, which is from Cambodia. I lived in Cambodia before I moved to Portland, and so that was made in a village in Cambodia. And that is that's actually the wall of a girl from Mongolia. It's like a handmade.
You just brought the whole wall home, rolled it up, and.
Well, you can fold it up. It's fabric.
Right. So you just rolled it up, and did you take a piece of the wall down, or was it like, here's one piece in case you were going to buy all 4 pieces of the yurt, or?
One piece.
Okay.
It's a decorative piece. It's not the actual wall.
Okay. Mild clarification.
So
as we were getting together, you said that you've been home for longer than you have ever been home.
Yep. Well, I've actually been in my house longer than I've ever been home. I've been home 27 days in a row. In my house, I've slept in my own bed for 27 nights. I actually like changed my sheets regularly now, and I was like, I'm like a real adult. Like, normally I like change my sheets when I like come home between trips or something, or before I go so they're clean when I come back. And now I'm like, oh, yeah.
What is most pleasantly surprising about being home for this long, and what's toughest about being home this long?
What's most surprising? I've really enjoyed it, and I feel like kind of the weight of, I'm not a big plan in advance kind of travel person. In fact, I had like 9 trips that I haven't gone on, but I've only had to cancel 2 plane tickets because I'm the kind of person who just book a ticket and like, oh, I'm supposed to go to Barbuda this week. I haven't gotten a ticket yet, and I'll just book it. So for me, that like I'm not behind planning any. Oh shoot, I didn't do this and I didn't do this and I'm behind on this and I didn't make this decision. So so that's probably been the most pleasant thing. Did Ben fall asleep or is he just frozen?
I think we all froze.
Oh,
for
I
a
am
second.
frozen. What the hell? Why am I? Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was watching myself being frozen.
It could have gone either way. It was like too much wine or frozen.
It was. I found it interesting, for the record. I was not falling asleep, but if I.
He's like, well, and Ben's taken up meditation. He's very good at it in the midst of anything.
What's toughest?
What's toughest? I think for me, the toughest part has been, I mean, I'm alone. I live alone, so I haven't been within like 6 foot of a person in like a month. And the last time I touched a person was at the bus stop in Oxford, getting on the bus to Heathrow. And my friend walked me to the bus and gave me a hug. And I was like, I had no idea like that was going to be like my last human contact in a really long time.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. So I'm the opposite end of the spectrum from the people who are like at home homeschooling their 6 children under 5. So.
Right, because children under 5 need a lot of school. Sorry, because I'm outside, we have to do this as well. So.
Is that a ball?
Yeah. Freya was really patient for like 8 minutes, and now she's like, you are here. This is your job when you were outside.
Okay, so you were also by the way, I think the human contact, like personally, I love that aspect of it, not having to shake hands or having to awkwardly decide, like when you see someone, do you hug, do you shake hands? Like I live in Miami where they love doing the double cheek kiss. I'm like, we're not in France. This seems unnecessary. They seem to disagree. So I love the fact that there's no human contact period. I'm just like from a distance, left to my own devices, I would just be Japanese and bow everywhere. But
yeah, so. I actually sort of hope that sticks. Like especially as a woman who goes a lot of places and is always meeting people who like I've emailed 3 times or who I interact with on Twitter. I'm like, I'm not really a hug you right off or maybe ever. Like I'm good, actually, just waving. Thank you.
It's the best greeting as far as I'm concerned. That's I would, yeah. So you're vegetarian.
Yes. For how many years? I stopped eating meat in 1997. And ironically, I stopped eating meat because a friend challenged me to give it up for Lent, which it's the end of Lent right now, apparently, because it's Easter, which means that was 23 years ago.
And are you vegan, vegetarian? Do you eat fish, pesca? I don't know, all the...
I'm a weird... I basically am a vegetarian who eats what makes me well. I eat fish, I eat eggs. I mostly don't eat dairy, but since I've been quarantined by myself, I've taken up making yogurt.
Because why not?
I used to when I lived overseas and like kind of always had to like live in survival, make everything from scratch mode. So I've kind of just like gone back to that place. Like I'm very qualified to live in a disaster zone. It's just not normally my own house. But
Is it not challenging when traveling to be vegetarian? Or?
I have been vegetarian almost the whole time I've been traveling and living overseas. So it's been harder in some places than in others, but I don't have a huge problem, but I'm also not like one of those like super picky vegetarians. Like if I'm in a situation, like I lived in Sudan for 7 months in Darfur, and there wasn't a whole lot to eat there, vegetarian or not vegetarian. So if they cooked like chicken soup for dinner, I would just pick the vegetables out of it. I'm not like one of those vegetarians who's like, I can't eat this because this was on the grill that had XYZ on it, So I'm flexible in that way, but I'm not very flexible in like eating meat, mostly because I don't like it.
Which makes sense. I was a vegetarian when I was younger for, I think, 8 years maybe, and it was really tough because I was also a lazy vegetarian where I followed it, but like vegetarian just ended up at the end meaning I would just eat pizza because like it's complicated otherwise. Like, you can't, there aren't many places you go, you look at the menu, you're like, oh, like what can you really have? Not so much traveling globally, but just in general, like it is tough. So my hats off to you.
Especially when you're doing like lots of domestic flights and mileage runs at the time. And
yeah, and it was very tough. And like, if I knew how to cook, I would be a vegetarian in a heartbeat. I still avoid a lot of meat, but good for you. That's impressive because when traveling, do you cook when you travel?
It really depends, like, what my situation is. Like, if I'm just on a trip and going from place to place, no, I just eat random things. In addition to being a vegetarian, I'm also allergic to potatoes, which is the strangest thing ever.
How can you be allergic to potatoes? I'm allergic to half the world, but potatoes?
Yeah. And so that's actually way harder than being a vegetarian, because I feel like there's a lot of places that you can get something else. I would say probably the hardest place I've traveled not being able to eat meat and potatoes was when I did the Trans-Siberian. And yeah,
there's literally nothing else.
I basically ate like a lot of trail bars and ramen noodles.
Yeah.
So living in Sudan,
yeah,
I don't mean to have so many questions, but everything you say, I'm like, wait, I got to ask about that as well. So,
right. And people have questions. Like Danielle was like, Steph, do you work in development or what do you do? Because,
yes,
it's eclectic geography.
Okay. I can't see any of the questions, so I'm just seeing you guys.
That's true. You can. Yep.
I have worked in development for a good part of the past 20 years. So I've lived in different developing places, and my background's in communications. So I do communications work for humanitarian organizations as my day job mostly. And so I was doing a disaster response work in Darfur during the peak. I mean, there's still conflict there, but during the peak of the conflict in 2005.
That must have been exciting.
It was probably the most difficult place I've ever lived. I will not lie. It was sunny all the time. That's a positive about it.
That is when I was at not at all comparable to your situation, but when I was at the Limery in Dhaka,
basically the same.
Basically the same. So no, there's a point here. So I was at the Limery in Dhaka, and the guest relations manager introduced herself, and she was from Florida, and she was super Floridian. So you don't picture most just single females just moving to Bangladesh. Anyway, so as it turned out, before Bangladesh, she's like, oh yeah, it's great here. Before this, I was in South Sudan. I was in Somalia, and I'm just like, that is, wow. I was kind of speechless. So that sounds very cool.
So for her, Dhaka was a luxury posting.
Exactly. She was like, it's super easy here, and it's yeah. So
the Floridians one with the bar on the roof, right?
Yes, there is. Yes. So, okay, yes, it is a surprisingly nice hotel. Bangladesh does otherwise maybe not have that many luxury properties. It was nice, very nice. Except for the Saudia crew, they kept I don't know, they were just very. Never mind, they were a little strange.
It was complicated. Okay, so this is a really great segue question. So Jack is asking genuine question: how hard is it to fly premium and make sure that you're okay with allergies? They're thinking of flying business class on their honeymoon. They don't want to be ill the next morning. Our airline's accommodating. I feel like potatoes are hard, right? Because you can't select potato allergy, but a shellfish allergy, there should be a box for that.
Probably. I've never not tried to get shellfish.
Yeah.
Do you order special meals when you fly?
I usually order the AVML, and it's a crapshoot because a lot of Indian food has potato in it. So I usually will order the AVML, and if there is potato in the main, then I will usually ask when they come around and say, did you order the AVML? And I'll say, well, do you know what the entree is? And because I have a potato allergy and blah, blah, blah. And usually if there is, they'll tell me. And I always look. But usually there's enough other things that, and it won't it's not if it's on the same plate or something or has touched something, it's not going to kill me. So.
Yeah, that would be my experience too, because I can't have gluten, and half the time I can't have gluten and I can't have adenine, which is in oats and quinoa and things like that. So half the time the gluten-free meal is oatmeal, which doesn't work for me. So, but yes, shellfish allergy, that should not have been hard to say together, should be manageable. But the honeymoon thing is exciting. Stephanie, you're the honeymoon expert for somebody who has never been married.
Exactly. I did a few years, I guess it was 3 years ago now. Gosh, I don't know where time goes. Time flies when you're sitting in your house. I think it was about 3 years ago. I had just had so many people write me or ask me hey, we're getting married and we're going to go on our honeymoon. How do we get a free first class ticket somewhere? How do we we haven't been interested in doing points and miles things at all, but we know they work because we know you do it. And now we want to go on a honeymoon somewhere. So I helped a couple of people, and then I kind of put together all of my information into a little online book called The Honeymoon Hack. And it's basically just helping people think through a strategy of, you're spending a shit ton of money on a wedding likely, and how do you kind of leverage those expenses with, meeting minimum spends and getting cards and putting everything together and earning enough points to pay for your honeymoon. So more strategy than, being a professional honeymooner. Although I did take myself on a honeymoon to Bora Bora, and I've taken myself on a honeymoon to the Maldives.
And are you on Team Maldives or Team Bora Bora?
I liked them both. I would probably, if I had to pick one to go back to forever. And
now that you have a new conception of forever.
Okay, so the question, I have a follow-up question before I make my decision. Is Team Bora Bora limited to Bora Bora itself, or do you get all of French Polynesia? Because I would assume with Maldives, you get all of the Maldives.
We'll give you all of French Polynesia. That's fine. So
then maybe I might go Team Bora Bora if I didn't actually have to be in Bora Bora, because Marquesas is really high on my list. I don't know why. But I did like the Maldives itself better than Bora Bora itself. Bora Bora is also a really weird place just to be a solo traveler, because you walk into a hotel and people are like, a what? What? You're traveling alone? There was a person here a couple months ago by themselves too. You guys should meet.
Are you introverted, extroverted? Where do you fall there?
I am introverted. I am introverted, but not super duper introverted. That
was a challenge.
Being in my house by myself, but I also miss humans.
Because when I lived in hotels, that was a tricky thing. Is I would struggle to go out and have dinner alone. Not that like I'm worried what people think or anything. I'm just like, I would rather be in my hotel room on my laptop working with food next to me than like sitting and just like feeling awkward. I don't know. So that is especially awkward.
To the restaurant in Bora Bora, and that really confused them.
Especially in a destination like that. And even it's almost awkward when you go to Bora Bora or the Maldives, and even if you're a couple and if you're not celebrating anything, it's almost awkward because everybody's on their honeymoon and they're like, oh, are you on your honeymoon? And it's like, no, just, you're
like, we're just
living
here.
the best life.
Yeah. Like, no, I was just in New Zealand last week and it was my birthday and I decided I wanted to come. So I changed my ticket.
The best part of, this sounds terrible, but the best part of places with nothing but honeymooners is they do always get into like explosive fights, which is very entertaining to watch because like, they then reveal their real thoughts on how the family acted at the wedding, and then they get into a big fight, and then they're
right, because they haven't talked about anything other than wedding planning for some indeterminate amount of time, so you forget how to have a conversation with your partner. Okay, Steve has a question for you, Ben, about the future experience of flying. I guess this could be everyone's question. Business class food, alcohol, amenities, service, stuff like that on international airlines. Do you think these are going to take a dip with airlines struggling so much?
So my guess with this, and I think it really could go either way, my guess would be that it's going to be like most things where the airlines that put effort into the onboard experience will keep doing so, and those that don't will not. And maybe some of the initiatives we've seen introduced lately might not come back. So for example, Delta has done a really great job among U.S. airlines that, they've added even in long haul economy, they've added Bellini service and all these things. Like I could see that at least for some amount of time not coming back. Like I think we might not see the additions we've seen lately, but I don't think we're suddenly going to see Emirates serving $10 champagne or, caviar eliminated in first class. So I think for the most part, the airlines that have done a good job till now will keep doing so, but I could be wrong. I mean, nobody knows how bad this is going to get. Do you have a take on that, or?
I don't even know how to speculate. Really, no idea.
At this point, it's all too early. Nobody knows anything. It's
right. Completely different sort of take, but just the same, might have the exact same answer of no one knows anything. Ivan asks, he now has a stack of canceled United tickets, like can't be combined, can't be transferred, expire in 8 months. What can he do? Can he like change them all to a refundable ticket and then refund, or?
So not really. I mean, the thing is, this is really the problem I have with all of the current situation is that airlines are mostly kind of sort of doing their best, give or take a little bit. There are exceptions. And as we see this evolve, hopefully the policies become more liberal. Like, at first, we've seen this evolve even over the past few weeks. So I think we're going to see them become more generous with, allowing maybe 24 months to use tickets rather than 12 months. So I think let's just wait and see how this evolves. I think things will become more customer friendly just because I don't think we're all going to be flying tomorrow. So I think just be patient. Like policies have gotten better and I think they'll keep getting better. Hopefully that's the case. If not, sorry. But
yeah, that's what I can say. So Stephanie, Danielle is wondering, do you have any suggestions, and I would say suggestions positive or suggestions negative, for solo female travelers? She also travels by herself and would love any tips since it seems like you've traveled to developing countries as well as more developed ones.
Yeah. I personally haven't not gone anywhere solely for the fact that I would have gone by myself versus didn't, there's never been a situation where I've been in where I'd be like, oh, well, I would go here if I wasn't traveling by myself. But I think that's based on whatever an individual's level of comfort is with travel. Any kind of specific genre of tip? I feel like it's a very broad category.
No, I mean, it's
okay.
It's happy hour. It's very flexible.
I have a question along those lines. Is there anywhere you've been, or where have you been that you've not felt safe? Not even specific. I mean, as a female traveler or in general, just.
I will say the very first time that I went to Bangladesh was it was the same year I gave up eating meat. So in 1997. Yeah. And that was probably the first place I ever went that I was like, I really didn't feel safe. And I was also, that was years ago, so I had a lot less travel experience. And I went during the middle of Ramadan and had no idea it was Ramadan and was super naive. I had no idea what was even happening. And I was traveling by myself because my friend got really sick in India and my visa expired. So I flew to Bangladesh myself to get my visa renewed. And there was like nowhere to stay. There was no women out in public. Everywhere I went, like just to even go to the embassy, I was like surrounded by like hundreds of men staring at me. And I was like literally dressed like head to toe in clothing. And so I think for me, that was probably the one time I can remember in my travels of specifically not feeling safe. But
yeah, it's interesting how you sometimes have those feelings like that, like where you're just like, this doesn't seem like a great combination of situations for me at this particular moment.
I will say in that, and I speak about this a lot when I talk about miles and traveling for women, and I always say, like, at that point in time, I was really young, super on a budget. It was before the Le Méridien existed in Dhaka, but there used to be a Sheraton in Dhaka, and it was one of the only actual hotels in Dhaka. And when I left India and left my friend there in Calcutta, we had like a Lonely Planet for Bangladesh I had traded for something in the market for, and it was like before the internet. And so we looked in the Lonely Planet and we were like, where should we meet when you get to Dhaka? And we said, like, we're going to meet at the Sheraton because of all the things in the Lonely Planet. This is the one thing that will most likely still be there. So I changed her ticket, so I knew when she was supposed to be coming in, and I went into that Sheraton that night she was going to arrive, and I waited for her, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. I was staying in like the scariest hotel that people would like knock on my door all night. I moved all my furniture in front of the door, and I waited for her because I knew her flight had been delayed. I waited for her until like midnight at the Sheraton, and I didn't know what to do. And every time I tell people the story, they were like, well, why didn't you just stay at the Sheraton? Because in the story, I go back to the scary hotel. And they're like, why didn't you just stay at the Sheraton? And I was like, that was like not even something I would have considered at the time. It was probably like $70 or something crazy.
Right, some unimaginable amount of money.
Unimaginable number for me as like a 23-year-old or whatever, and a 20-year-old in 1997. But anyway, so I went back, but I talk a lot about how I really see my points as an emergency currency and a safety currency as a solo female traveler. So I don't fly into flights that fly into Africa in the middle of the night because I don't have to. If I can fly on a more expensive flight, or if I'm flying on points, it doesn't matter if you land in the middle of the night or if you land in 2 in the afternoon. You know, I can, even if I'm going to stay somewhere super cheap, I can, if I land in the middle of the night, I can use my points and stay at whatever the ridiculous airport hotel is, and then get an Uber in the morning or something. So I'm using that kind of as a cushion for safety. And if I'm in that kind of situation where I'm like, I know something's not right here, I can change my plan like that if I have that flexibility, which I wouldn't have if I was dealing with money.
Right.
Well said.
It's definitely been a lot easier to cancel things. On that note, where would you guys have been in the world right now if we weren't quarantining? Ben?
April 9th.
I would have gotten back from New Orleans 3 days ago, and I would have gotten back from Japan 9 days ago, and in 2.5 weeks I would be going to Namibia. So instead, I have just not done any of that. Thanks for the reminder. How about you?
I was going to go to Antigua and Barbuda this week. This was my year of the Southern Caribbean.
And Tiffany?
I would be in Cuba today, and then like probably crashing at your place on Saturday. So you're welcome. Good. Yeah, quarantine worked out well for you in that way. You don't have to wash the towels in the guest bathroom.
He wasn't going to wash them for you anyway.
No, Ben is actually an amazing host. Like, he and Ford are very kind whenever I'm there. Like, they're very sweet about it. Somebody had a good question about the ships. So Mike is wondering, Stephanie, if you can talk more about the Mercy ship experience. Like, what do you do and how long were you on the ship? And his understanding that you pay to join, but is that still how it works?
Yeah. So for Mercy Ships is its own organization. Mercy Ships is a non-governmental NGO that has hospital ships that mostly work in West Africa. A lot of people refer to like the government hospital ships as Mercy Ships as well. So I wasn't on one of those. And now everybody knows about them because they're deployed.
Right. But those actually like did medical stuff.
Yeah. So the ship I was on, well, they all do medical stuff, but the one I was on, we worked in West Africa mostly, and the ship primarily did maxillofacial surgery. So they helped people with cleft lips, cleft palates, like tumors. They did cataract surgeries, a whole bunch of different medical stuff. I did that for 5 years from 1999 to 2004 and was mostly in Sierra Leone for 3 years during that at the end of the war there. And it was volunteer. I raised money to do it for 5 years, and I don't know what it costs anymore because that was almost 20 years ago that I did it now. Crazy. But I stay youthful. And yeah, but I think I paid like $300 a month or something crazy that I raised, and that covered kind of my room and board. And you had to pay for your own like flights in and out. And then so in addition to the ship doing medical work, we also did other development and humanitarian projects. So I worked in a primary education project in Sierra Leone, helping to work with kids who had been either child soldiers or involved in the conflict there in some way, or had been displaced from their houses. So, yeah.
Wow.
So it was an amazing experience. Living on the ship was probably one of the craziest and also most fun times of my life. Like, yeah, and the ship still operates. They actually, I think, are docked in Tenerife right now, but no one can leave the ship. So they're basically all people on the ship long term are docked because they were doing an outreach, I think, in Togo or somewhere. They were somewhere based in West Africa, but then when they closed the borders in the country they were in, the vulnerable, anyone who was vulnerable left the ship, and then the people who were long-term crew on the ship, they're still on the ship now, but just quarantined in Tenerife. So, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben, do you still have a whole bunch of cruise ships just hanging out outside of your apartment windows?
Yes, so they're all parked at the port. Every slot was taken, and then also they're like just out off of Miami Beach. There's a bunch just lined up along the water, and then I think they come in and out to drop off the crews, and then they go back out and they wait out there. So it seems to be a revolving door of dropping off crews, and I guess they get sent back on Ethiopian Airlines, and then once the plane gets back, then they change it again. So
wow. I think that's going to be a fascinating part of the travel industry to watch, how it changes the whole cruise part.
Do you think we'll see, what about planes? Are we going to social distance going to stay a thing, you think? Or will anything change about the flying experience, not in terms of amenities, but in terms of...
I think it will be different initially. Because I think that people are just like I even noticed just walking down the street, like having been in my house for 4 weeks without seeing people. If somebody comes anywhere near me, I'm just kind of like, wah, you know? And so I don't think anybody's going to be able to be like, oh, well, this is, okay, it's over. You can just go back to regular. I think, you know, we're like socially like, we've moved in that way where we're not comfortable in that close proximity to people at the moment. And so I think that it will take a little while for people to just be like, okay, I'm all, you know what, one positive thing will be is I bet everyone won't crowd the boarding gate anymore.
That would be nice.
They're like, anyone who Anyone.
You're more optimistic than I am about that. I think that is just a human nature or at least in the U.S. that will never go away. That, the crowding of boarding gates, geez.
Yeah.
So Amir comments on that. He's like, I'm loving all the interesting charter flights for evacuations. Ben, what's the latest update on odd planes flying over your house?
Okay, so sorry. So this was why I was a little frazzled at the beginning, because I was just finishing up a blog post. So I'm on Flight Radar 24 all day because I hear planes right over my home, and when I hear them, then I look. First, I try to identify what plane it is based on the engine sound and time of day, because I'm like, oh, that's an A350. Okay, it's Qatar Airways coming from Doha. But sometimes I'm like, that seems a little odd. And especially now the schedules are, of course, changing because we have a lot fewer flights. So there was a Swift airplane. So Swift Air is a charter airline based out of Miami. And they mostly operate like flights to Cuba on behalf of either other airlines or even to Gitmo or whatever. They do a bunch of charter flights. Very glamorous. Anyway, so this was coming from Brownsville, which I had to look up. So Brownsville is a border city in southern Texas that is just like a few miles from the border with Mexico. And then I go, of course, to the Brownsville airport Wikipedia page, because I always look up like arrivals and departures, like where could it be coming from. So, it's Brownsville South Padre Island International Airport. And the only flights they're supposed to have are on American Eagle and United Express to Dallas and Houston. Anyway, so then I look up the tail number of this 30-year-old 737-400. And so as it turns out, this plane today has flown from Miami to Columbus, Georgia, to Alexandria, Louisiana, to Brownsville, and then back to Miami. And so I'm Googling
That's like
Brownsville.
A Southwest route, but for airports you've never heard of.
Exactly. So I was like Columbus. I'm like, wait, that's not the Columbus airport code, but okay, it's Georgia. And so then I'm Googling like Swift Air Brownsville. And then it's like, apparently these are largely ICE flights. So I guess they're deporting people or something, because there's apparently, now I already wrote about this and someone said that these flights are immigration and customs enforcement flights between detention centers. And also Brownsville is used to send persons back to Honduras, etc. If you watch the Brownsville airport arrivals and departures on Flight Radar 24, one will see these flights.
That's careful.
Exactly. So apparently these are deportation flights or something, and I guess the plane picked up a bunch of people and is now going back here. So, or maybe something else. Sorry?
I think there might be a military base in Columbus. I might be making that up, but
it could be, or it could be military. Or my other thought was it could, but this doesn't actually make sense. But like there are a lot of cruise ships arriving, and cruise passengers are no longer allowed on whatever. So I don't know if it was maybe a charter or something, but that seems like very random cities to, go to for that. So I don't know, but it was very interesting. Let me tell you, the rabbit hole I get to go down a few times a day. I'm like, this makes no sense. And like, I know at this point, all the flights, like we have Skylease cargo. It's coming from Anchorage. It's coming from Quito. It's coming from Montevideo. It's coming from everywhere. Like I know these random ass flights, but this was beyond random ass. So anyway.
That's what you're doing to fill up your travel time.
And that's Miami. We get some weird, I know airlines pretty well. And like, there's not a major airport I go to where I'm like, oh, I'm an AvGeek. I can identify any airline from a distance, but Miami, even when I'm taxiing in, sometimes I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, that plane, I don't know what airline that is. So we get some unique ones here. So anyway, very exciting. It's the little things in life,
Are you filling up your time with Tiffany?
Yeah, I don't have any extra time, is what I've realized. It's been interesting. We were talking about that. Now we're doing happy hours, which I'm happy to do, but it's, it's not like we were commuting and we've traded our commuting time for something else. That's sort of the weird thing about already being used to working from home in this environment. It is nice being home, especially today when the weather's nice. It's going to be 27 this weekend, so I feel like I have to get my. I know Ben is like, what? Again, Ben, that's Fahrenheit.
And it's 27 Celsius here. It's like 90. It was 91 today. So
yeah, but right now it's perfect. So.
I told someone today. I'm normally working from home when I'm not traveling, and when I'm traveling, I'm just working. And I'm like, you would think I would have a lot more time since I don't have to move and catch flights and change hotels. And I was like, I think I'm jet lagged for like lack of motion or something. I'm just like tired all the time. I sleep weird hours. I'm getting less done.
So that's an interesting point because, so have you struggled to maintain a regular schedule? Like you're so not used to it that it's tough, or?
Well, I feel like I'm just like doing things a lot slower. You know, like I have the same number of projects right now that I would have and be traveling full time. And I'm just literally in my house and I'm like, I can't believe I didn't get this done today. I can't believe I didn't get this done today. So I don't know. And I'm not having a ton of like extra Zoom calls, or although I will say I feel like as someone who's been virtually working for years and years, it is interesting the number of people, like suddenly my family understands how like the internet works. And they're like, oh yeah, we can call you. We can just like FaceTime with you. And I'm like, I've been trying to get you to do that for like 14 years.
Oh my goodness. I don't know how I feel about everybody suddenly having Zoom and like doing because it's very easy to avoid human contact when people don't communicate that way. I'm like, sorry, I can't do anything. I have to wash my hair or something versus when people are like, oh, well, Zoom. Shit. So.
Right. You're like, you don't even have to leave.
I have been getting dressed every day and I have been brushing my hair much more than normal. So I'm actually probably, spending more time on personal hygiene.
How do you find the motivation to do your hair or anything like when because of video calls or because of just...
I think it's a distraction. I think it's just totally like a self-distraction or something. I don't have any.
Sorry, we're going on another house and yard tour because apparently a MacBook Pro cannot live stream for 45 minutes without running out of battery.
Oh no.
We can go through a house tour.
And I think another thing is I always, when I pack to travel, I always like take like the same 4 pieces of clothing, and I'm always just living out of my carry-on, so I have like no choice. And here I have like an entire closet full of all different fun things to wear. So I was like, I should get dressed every day.
Good for you. That's tough to do because like if at home it's just, I feel like it's the same thing.
Do you pick a different pair of airlines every day?
So I've actually, it's too warm in Miami for airplane pajamas. So I just have like, what is it called? Athleisure. I don't know what the hell they call it. Like just t-shirt, Lululemon or whatever. But I try occasionally, but it's quite sometimes it doesn't actually happen as much as it should. Oh, we lost Tiffany.
No, I'm still here.
There.
It's that's a great, very attractive place for it to have frozen.
What is or do we have questions or?
Hang on.
What is your favorite and least favorite place you've been to? And I know that's don't worry about throwing anyone under the bus or any country under the bus or do, but don't.
Favorite, I would definitely say Antarctica. I got to go to Antarctica a couple of years ago, and it was just super magical. It was super magical, and nobody's messed it up, and I love nature, and so...
Okay, I'm jealous. Tell us more about your trip to Antarctica. Like, how?
You want, like, the nerdy details of, like, how I flew there, or...
So you flew or you cruised?
I flew to Ushuaia and then cruised there. I went with Polar Expeditions, and it was 14 days, and it was magical. The being on the Mercy ship for 5 years was a big asset to me because 99.9% of the ship was incredibly seasick crossing the Drake Passage. I hung out on the bridge with the Filipino crew the entire sail because I was like one of the only people who wasn't like laying down. I was a bit nauseous, but.
How far is it from Ushuaia till you start getting to?
It's a few days. It's a few days completely at sea. And then when you hit the tip of the peninsula, then you start doing things even though you're still sailing south every day. And
so the rough part is the few days at sea or the whole thing?
The rough part is the few days at sea. So when you're crossing the Drake Passage, like from the tip of South America to where you get to the peninsula of Antarctica.
And how rough are we talking?
It was like...
Really?
Yeah. It's the roughest sail I've ever been on. And I lived on a ship for 5 years.
Okay, so...
that's good context. Hi.
How often do you get to go off? Hi! Oh my goodness. It's
How often do you go off the ship?
Yes.
So once you get, on the ship I was on, there was about 80 people, and you stop 2 places a day. So, and then there's like rules. The rules for Antarctica is I think you can't have more than 40 or 50 people on the actual land at one time. So they split the entire ship up into 2 different groups, and then you would stop one place, and then one group would go by zodiac to land, and then those zodiacs would come back, and then the second group would basically go on the zodiacs around the icebergs and go looking for seals and all different kinds of stuff, and then you would switch. So then the second group got to go on the land and do a hike or do whatever, and then so you do that in the morning, and you'd come back and they'd give you hot chocolate, and then you would eat a lot of things, and then you would sail somewhere, and the whole time you were sailing there'd be whales everywhere, and it was amazing, and it never gets dark, so you basically don't ever want to sleep because it's crazy. And it was cold, but it wasn't crazy cold because it is the middle of the summer, so it's still like 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but anyway, 0 degrees. Yes. And anyway, so you're kind of just like out and watching stuff all the time, and then in the afternoon you stop again somewhere else. And we stopped at different like research stations. We stopped at just like really beautiful places, and then like there was these just bays full of icebergs that were insane. So
did they have any fuel somewhere?
No.
Wait, how much? I totally understand planes, but ships, like how long can a ship go? Like how big is the fuel tank?
The ship can go pretty long. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to think of like when I lived on the ship, we sailed from my very first sail, we sailed 16 days from South Africa to the Canary Islands. And that was, we may have stopped for fuel off the coast of Gabon that time, but yeah, we would maybe get fuel one time on a long sail like that. So.
Okay. And then is there, if you're being critical, is there a diminishing return, like day one of seeing Antarctica, or is the landscape sufficiently different? Because like, for example, when I did a safari, I absolutely loved it. But day 5 was not as exciting as day 1. It's like, oh, great, a tiger. Like, okay. Or a lion.
I know. The last safari I did, this probably sounds terrible, but I've done several safaris. And especially after doing a job where you drive around the desert in a Land Rover, I was like, if you see a leopard, wake me up.
And even then, it's like 50-50. But so is Antarctica sufficiently?
No, I would say for Antarctica, it was so different than anything I've ever seen. And I mean, even just sitting there in the snow, you would just be like, just sit there and look at it. And you'd just be like, wow. And you could listen, and like the glaciers would be calving, like it was just sounds you've never heard before. I would say like the first day you like see penguins for the first time, like the families of penguins, and you take like 30,000 pictures. And I like the 10th inning penguins, you don't take any pictures because you're like, I have 30,000 pictures of penguins, so I'm only going to take a picture of a penguin if it walks in front of this iceberg and raises its left wing, But it's like, you get to the point where you aren't just doing it for the experience of like taking the picture. You're kind of like over that, and you've been there long enough where you're kind of just like immersed in like, this is pretty amazing, and you aren't doing it for like 17 hours a day. You're there, you're on the ground for like an hour or two at a time. So
and what was the Wi-Fi situation?
What was the what? The Wi-Fi?
Situation.
Oh, it didn't work at all. Like 0.
I so badly want to do an Antarctica cruise, but I don't know if Wi-Fi is
fine. Like having a few days without internet would be really good for you. And you'd be basically by floating ice packs. So it would be therapeutic, right? You could just be icing the whole time.
But you could do like 100 posts before you leave, and you would write like 2,000 on the ship. You would have so many by the time you came back. There is Wi-Fi on the ship. It just doesn't work very well.
Yeah, Ben doesn't like to write posts if he can't publish them before proofreading. Like immediately, it's like write, publish, maybe proofread, probably not. It's probably fine. Like Ben has the best first drafts of anyone I've ever met. So it's like, why,
Yeah, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Okay, now I'm inspired to. And least favorite?
I always tell people Bangladesh. I don't know why.
Least favorite?
Second least favorite. I've never thought about second least favorite.
Have your prepared answers for best and worst.
Exactly. Second least favorite. Probably Kenya. Not my favorite.
Interesting. Okay. I like the copy.
Can we talk about hammocks?
Yeah, sure. I was going to actually do this whole thing in a hammock, but I thought maybe I'd fall out during the...
It could have happened. Or like me, you might have run out of battery and had to do like an awkward walk through the house. And
very true. And there's a lot of dishes in my kitchen.
Yeah, so I think this is really cool. So when you were in Ethiopia?
When I was in Cambodia, I started a travel hammock company with a couple of my friends. And I actually have hammocked on all 7 continents. It's one of my strange claims to fame.
What the Antarctica hammock? How does that work?
Well, technically, I hammocked on the ship, but I have some pretty amazing pictures of me whale watching in a hammock. And I was really nervous the first day I hung up the hammock. I was like, I bet the crew's not going to like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. All they can do is yell at me and tell me to take it down. And they were like, "This is amazing. Will you sell this to one of us?" And I was like, "Of course I will." But yeah, so when I was in Cambodia, I've always kind of had an obsession with hammocks, and some friends of mine, we had hammocks when we lived in DC, and people in DC are typically, not to offend anyone who lives in DC who might be watching this, but a little bit, kind of on the grumpier side and very focused on work. And I moved from Sudan to DC, and that was probably the hardest re-entry I've ever had anywhere. And the crazy thing is like Sudan, that was when I was living in Darfur, and that was probably the hardest place I'd ever lived. And I moved from there to DC, which should have been super easy, but it was like in Sudan, everyone was like so joyful, even though they had absolutely nothing and were so giving. And I moved to DC, and everyone was kind of like on their Blackberries and, and I used to hang my hammock up in my front, like in my little front yard on my townhouse in DC, and people would stop and talk to me. And I was like, hammocks are magic. And so my friends and I were like, we need to figure out how we can make our own hammocks and sell them in DC at the market. And this was like before any of the big hammock companies existed. And when I moved to Cambodia, I lived in Cambodia from 2009 to 2013 before I moved to Portland. And I had met some women who had started their own seamstress business. And I happened to be in a market and found some fabric. And I took it to the seamstress people, and I drew a picture of what I wanted. And I wrote to my friends, and I was like, I found a way we can make hammocks. And so we started making hammocks with those women in Cambodia, and did that for probably the 3 years I was there, and then the year after. And then the year following that, we were kind of looking at a way we could scale the business. And one of my business partners had moved to Ethiopia in the time being. And so we found a way that we could work with some women who were at a sewing center in Addis to make hammocks. So we make hammocks in Ethiopia. They're made by women in Ethiopia, and we sell them. And, I sell them more or less. I'm like fairly apathetic about it, but it's like crazy. This last couple weeks, I was sick and then I was quarantined and I wasn't even like checking the hammock email. And then I was like, well, apparently people need hammocks right now. They're like the perfect social distancing tool. So I've been, I had to figure out the whole entire remote, like how do I get boxes delivered from the post office so I can like do click and ship postage so I can get them picked up. So I've been selling a lot of hammocks recently.
So this is actually why you don't have time to do anything else, because your like side hustle is now like a major thing.
True. That's true. So I can only sell the hammocks that are in my basement, but there are 48 hammocks in my basement, ready to be shipped. And yeah, because the rest of them are in storage where someone else is not quarantined. But I've got some here, and yeah, I've been doing that. And if anyone is watching would like a hammock, there is a stay at home is a discount code for $14 off. And that's $1 a day for your 14-day mandatory quarantine. Because I'm a nerd like that.
Where are the only 14-day quarantines? I'm jealous.
No, it was early on when you came back and you were supposed to be mandatory quarantine for 14 days. The initial.
Is the discount now like $200 because we're going to be quarantined for 200 days, or?
I'll pay you. I will pay you. No. Speaking of, when did you fly back into the States then? If you've been around the 14th or 15th?
For me, I got back on the literally 30 days ago, exactly. It was Tuesday 4 weeks ago. So. And
was it crazy in Miami when you flew in? I'm just curious.
For Tiffany, it was crazier because she was coming back at the end. For me, it's crazy because I have global entry and I'm getting the X's right now on my global entry thing. So because I passed through Taiwan like a couple of months ago, every time I've re-entered the U.S. since, even coming from Mexico and from Nicaragua, they're convinced I have coronavirus. So they when I entered, they made me put on a face mask. I had to go to secondary. Like I wasn't sick, I was totally fine. But yeah, but Tiffany came back on the last day you could return from Europe, right?
Right. It was technically the last day that you could come back from Europe without going through extra hassle. But of course, the way that was announced, so we flew back on Friday, which was our originally scheduled day to fly back. But it was announced like Wednesday at the end of the night. And the way it was worded made people think that flights were going to end. And so we got to the airport on Friday in Marrakesh, and it was legitimately the craziest thing I have ever seen. Because we walked in and we saw massive queues, and I just assumed they were like the security queues, because some airports have that, right? You're like, okay, this is just going to be one of those places where you're going to be in line for 3 hours because reasons. But they were lines for people to try and buy tickets, and there were like tears and screaming and people trying to get tickets out of Morocco. But then, of course, like getting into the U.S., there's nothing. Like JFK even has the facial recognition at global entry, so not even scanning your passport, no questions, nothing at all.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So I think I came in 2 days after you because I came in from the UK and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I actually put on the day they made the Europe announcement. My friends are like, "Are you going to leave the UK?" And I'm like, I don't know. And so I put tickets on hold for like every day for the next 5 days.
Right, because why not?
And I was like, I'm just going to pay attention to what happens and leave when I need to. And on that Saturday morning, I woke up and I was in Oxford, and my friend said, I think they're going to close the UK border today. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go on my ticket that I have on hold for like 12:30 then. So I got on a bus and I left. And actually the very last meal I ate in public was the cafe lounge. That's the last food that was served to me by But when I got into LA, I got there and they made everybody go through to the Brady terminal. And so even though I landed in T4, and I got there and there was like hundreds of people in the line for immigration and the CDC screening. And I walked in and they said, "Where did you come from?" And I said, I came from the UK. I said I came from London, and they said, "On what airline?" And I said, "On American, and I have global entry." And they're like, "Oh, you can just go ahead." So I literally walked through a sea of hundreds of people on both sides, Meanwhile, I had a sinus infection. I'm pretty sure I had a fever. And I walked through global entry, I parted the Red Sea, and I was out of immigration in 30 seconds. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
Like, and maybe bad.
So, anyhow, yeah, so I was curious what other people were experiencing kind of at the same time. So
that is an interesting return.
Definitely. But I did do the socially responsible thing and quarantine myself upon arrival. So.
And since
this has flown by because you had so many interesting things, and now I'm gonna after this start Googling Antarctica cruises, even though I don't know when the hell I would ever do one, and then near future. But
I bet it's gonna be a great year to do one, Ben, because no one's gonna go on cruises.
Well, are we ever going to be able to go on cruises? I mean, we'll see. I guess that's. But thank you so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope that we can do something in person sometime when that's a thing that people do again.
When that's a thing.
Definitely. We will meet up for some hard seltzer in St. Pete.
Yes, that I will be. Can I order this online as well, the hard seltzer?
I don't think you can order it online. I think they're just doing local pickup.
I will be then very soon with that. Perfect.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, and we will see many of you Sunday for brunch.
So I know we didn't get to a lot of questions today, but this was so interesting that I had all the questions, I think, so for many of them. So thank you for answering all of them. And yes, thank you guys. Have a good evening.